All right. Well, I am so excited to be hanging out with one of my besties today who is incredible. You probably already know who she is, but if not, I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Her name is Jen Jones. She is incredible. She is a best-selling author. She is a mom of four, a wife, a coach, a really like a pastor of many women. Jen, you are amazing. You have lots of hats, lots of titles, but I just consider you a friend that have been on the journey. We've been together for the last decade, kind of doing this thing together. So welcome, Jen Jones, to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that intro. It feels super biased because you love me and I know you love me, and we are really, really great friends. And it has been a decade. I think it's a decade. It's a decade. That's a long time, especially in today's world that's tumultuous and opinionated and disconnected and isolated and all the things. That's a really long time to walk through life with someone. So thank you.
Oh, well, I love it. And I always get pretty reflective at the turn of a decade. And I think back on, okay, look at all the things that God has done. Look at all the lessons that I've learned. And then I also begin to think about, like, what do I want in this next decade? And as I'm venturing out to really help women build their brave at a new level, to step out and do the things that God has created them to do, one of the things I definitely want is to expose them to all of the amazing women in my community that have helped to build my brave and pushed me when I was feeling like I wasn't capable, and believed in me when I wasn't sure if I had what it took. And you have been one of those people. So I'm excited for the ladies to get to know you today. And I know you're going to be speaking at the conference in September, and I can't wait to have you there. So they're going to get a little bit of a sneak peek of a few of the things we might be talking about there. But I would love first to jump in, and I think your most recent book, right, Divinely Different, and that tagline of creating a significant life when the way is unexpected, unwanted, and unknown. Ooh, that hits home with a lot of us. And as I think I look back over the last decade, I would say that really resonates. So can you just share for just a few minutes, tell us a little bit about your journey, where this message came from? Because it's really not just a recent book. I mean, this is a life message that you've been living and sharing for a long time.
Yeah. So funny that you say that you look at life in decades. Shocking that we're so deeply connected in friendship, because that is something that, I may not have set out to, you might do that very intentionally. I don't know that I set out like intentionally to take every year in decades, but that has occurred and happened. And so in 2013, I wrote my first book that felt very much like a culmination of the previous 10 years. And like, I had a plan of what was going to happen when that book dropped in 2013. And none of what I planned actually occurred. God's plan did, though. And it, in so many ways, like, surpassed like expectations or thoughts that I had, that book in 2013 launched the next 10 of my life. So, about a year and a half ago, when I was sitting on my sofa, and I'm doing what I do every morning, I have as you do too, we have like these like power hours, these morning routines, whatever, miracle mornings, whatever you want to call them. But I just sit on my sofa and was having time with God and began to journal. And it was like, it's not an audible voice, but it was a voice that is familiar to me, that I know is God. And it was like, the word was, write another book, which I thought maybe I was a one-hit wonder. I don't know. I was like, maybe this is a one and done, what I had done. So I wrote it down really quickly. It's time to write a book. And I wasn't certain all that it would be about at that moment, but I was able to reflect back in faith and go, oh, this will launch my next 10. So we're going to culminate the back 10. And this is now, I just had this faith going, oh, well, you did that before, you're doing it again. And so as I began to write, it's not a memoir by any means, but as I began to write the lessons of then the back 10, it very much was the story of, again, how I thought things were going to go a certain way, and they go very different. Here's the deal, though. It's never, the stories can be hard and can be bad, but the outcomes are not. And it's not like some of the things that were in my heart didn't occur. They just came in a way that I wasn't expecting. And many of them surpassed like ideas I would have even had on my own. And so I think that the main thing that I think about as I'm sort of talking about where the book even came from, which I don't even know if that was your question, but is Philippians 1:6. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And I think whether it's writing a book, launching a conference, starting a business, building a brand, it is going to look different. Having a family, oh my goodness, having a family, talk about that, having curveballs. We'll get into that, but we have these dreams and desires in our hearts, and I think we should pursue them passionately. And then there is this a posture of surrender, a palms up that has to occur. It doesn't have to, but if you're following Jesus, it inevitably will, because he wants to complete the work, and we can be confident. So divinely different is, divine means from God. So it was a very different path than I would have planned. It's a very different path than I expected, but it is so divine, and it has my life. I feel like I have created a significant life, even though, and that's the God factor. That's the supernatural piece that comes when we surrender and obey. I don't know.
I love that.
But there you go.
No, I mean, I love that. And I think that there's probably a lot of women listening today that are in the middle of, some potentially unwanted, unplanned, unknown circumstances. And, Jen and I are a lot alike. We're kind of that Enneagram 3 achiever type who, I don't know, we are good visionaries and strategists, and we're like, okay, I know what I want. And actually, I know the 10 steps to get there. I have a great plan, all the details, good to go. And then God shakes things up, and we're like, wait a second, I had a really good plan. This wasn't part of the plan, So what would you say today to women who are in the middle? I mean, I was there 20 months ago. I was in the messy middle of some stuff, and you can't even see God working.
Yeah.
You feel kind of lost and abandoned, and you're like, where are you in all of this? And so, I know the book is kind of you getting a little bit to the other side and being able to look back and go, oh, look what he did. But what would you say to the women who are right now in the messy middle of the unwanted, unplanned, unknown circumstances?
Well, I just want to validate the fact that you probably feel like you're failing, because that's what it feels like. It feels like, oh, I'm failing. The curveballs, the twists, the turns, the unwanted diagnosis, the unwanted decisions, the things that are not even actually in your control, that are because of someone else, and all of this stuff. Some of it feels unfair, but a lot of it feels like you just are failing. And it's often because we are measuring our progress by worldly standards. We're measuring our progress by a vision, by a vision board that we had drawn up, by someone else's story. We're measuring it according to what we see another family look like, or another business leader looking like, or the 3 happy hops that it took the other ministry leader, whatever your vein. And so we feel like we're failing because we're actually looking at success the way that honestly we define success, but because of the way that the world has defined success. And I just think that what I have come to know, and what I now apply, because I still have messy middles. There's not everything is tied up with a pretty little bow, even in my life now. But what faith has my history has taught me, okay, the work that God's doing in me is far greater than the work that he might be doing through me, or at some point will do, like as a result of the gifts that he has given me. And that I need to keep my perspective. I think that I've just embraced the process. I hate that. I know it feels super, super cliche, but you have to go through. There is no way out. It is only through. And then really following God's like leading, which I know he feels far off at times, but he is with us. He is there. Like Jesus wept, even though he knew he was about to resurrect a dead brother named Lazarus, he still wept. And I think the reason he wept is just because he's like, I'm with you. Like, I'm with you. So he knows what he's going to do. He's going to resurrect your circumstance. He's going to make something great out of it. That's what Jesus promises. But in the meantime, he is weeping with you. And I have had to at times let that be enough, because I want answers. I want solutions. But it's like, okay, I guess you're with me. So I just got to follow that word. And then honestly continue to seek his perspective about what really matters. Outcomes really matter to me. I don't know that if you look through the Bible, it's really not the outcomes that God ever really cared about in a person's life. It was more the journey of it. It was more the relationship piece of it. It was more the character parts, the fruit parts, it is never about, because that's God. That's his victory. That's his victory. That's what he knows he can do. His goal is, like, his perspective is more just about connecting and being with us and watching us trust him and grow and stand in faith as we wait.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's like kind of a hard word when you're in it. On the other side, you're like, that's amazing. But in the middle, it's like, oh, that's the answer. That's the hope.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yeah. And I find it interesting because I think there's, some driven, ambitious women that probably both you and I attract to our communities, that when we're not careful or intentional, we fall into a lot of self-reliance. And so sometimes in these situations, we end up having a bit of a breakdown, because though we normally are people that you can rely on, we're the go-to, we've got a solution, we can fix it, or at least we'll try, like, you want us on your team because we're going to like help make it happen. When we get to these points in our life and we're like, I have zero control over this. And there's a little bit of like this battle of the wills with God, and who's going to win, but there's still this thing in you, and that's been my journey the last 18 months too. And that's why I think I resonate so much with kind of this life message and what your book talks about, because you have to, on your own, have it out with God and get to this place where you do surrender and trust that maybe he is exactly answering your prayers in a way you never intended or planned. And that there has to be a bit of a breaking in you and of your old mindsets and tendencies to become the person that can even live the life that you want to live, or be the mom you want to be, or the business owner, or whatever. And so, but that process is hard, that undoing of kind of self-reliance, I think, and it's something we fall back into when we're not careful. So I hear that. And I guess my encouragement to ladies in the middle of this would just be something I had to remind myself is, I always repeat that scripture that God's ways are higher than mine. Like, I'm not going to be able to fathom. And so I really need to be kind of strategic with what questions I'm asking, because the why God questions don't get me anywhere. I just kind of stay in a spiral and struggling. But if instead I can go, okay, God, what do you want me to do right now? What is the next best step? And kind of go, okay, your ways are higher than mine. I can't see it. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to trust. That's what faith is. When you trust and you can't see it. And then the promise that God gives us that if we do trust in him, he'll give us a peace that surpasses understanding. And that's what I love, because you're right, Jen, there's no way but through. But the promise that we can stand on is that even in the messy middle, we are not alone. And he will give us a peace that the world can't fathom if we trust in him and lean, even when we can't see how it's going to work out yet. So, ladies, if you're there, I would encourage you to read this book, follow Jen. Jen, you have, and I think we both worked hard at this a bit, but we tend to be more of the vulnerable side of things, right? My husband would say oversharing, but I'm like, that's how I process. That's how I heal. Some people do it. Some people don't. But what have you found? And then I want to talk about this. I listened to an old TED Talk from Brene Brown yesterday about vulnerability, and I was like, oh, it's so good. But what does that kind of make you think of? Like, why do you think you are able to do that? And what is that done for you personally to be able to kind of come from a place where you would lean into perfectionism or image management and instead move into vulnerability?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that for me, it took a lot of getting honest with my own self. I do tend to be just naturally a little bit more optimistic as a person. I do see a glass half empty. But then also, if I'm super honest, I actually also just really like to be admired. So, like, I don't want to ever cast myself or others that are like close to me in any kind of light that would seem like we don't have it all together. I do think some of it comes even from a very well-meaning church background that that connected a strong prayer life and great faith equals life is all together. And so, while I can appreciate that you don't want to take the screaming and fighting that's happening before church into the entranceway of the church, like that's a bit much. Like the extreme opposite was so like just the norm. And to like say that anything was wrong actually was not safe because it was a reflection on your faith walk, your Christianity. And I think it was not intended necessarily. Not, I mean, I don't, but I have that in me too. So it was like, well, there's an element of life that I had in my walk with Jesus that was very much a vending machine God. So I'm going to do good, and then you're going to do good back, and we're going to just have this beautiful exchange, and the whole world's going to see. And we're going to do it for your glory. We're going to do it all for your glory. And really, I think the first shattering and of the brokenness in me where I had to get super, super honest happened with a very unwanted event. And it was 20 years ago when I had a daughter with an unexpected diagnosis of Down syndrome. And what that did is just kind of rock some of my theology, because there was a part of me that thought like that, how could that happen to me? I've done good, God. And and so then it was like, my vulnerability started with my relationship with God, because I actually got super mad at him. And I was like, I don't know if this is actually okay. I don't think you're supposed to get mad at God, but I am so mad at you. I'm not talking to you. I don't even know if your whole word is true. And so I'm not going to church. And my husband was a pastor, and I'm not going, and I don't know how long I'm not going, but I'll show you. But honestly, that was the best thing that happened for me. So my vulnerability and my honesty started there. And then as me and God grew and I recognized how safe he was, and he began to reveal the true heart of who he is and his actual expectations of me, and he began to highlight them through his word, then I began to tiptoe into the waters with others. And I do think it's God, yourself, and others. And again, in the church I grew up in, we didn't talk a lot about like yourself or loving yourself, or like that felt very like self-helpy, which was actually like not right. But I also got real honest with myself. So it was like God, myself, and then I was able to be a little more honest, a little more vulnerable. And as I did it with the right people, I didn't just go around, I didn't blast on social media. But I did start with people that I thought would be wise to, and our relationship became so much richer. And it was actually quite rewarding, not just for me to be able to be like, oh, okay, now you know the truth. It actually was helpful to them, like, me too, which are two very powerful words. So then it was like, you too. So then there was this deep connection that then honestly caused me like, okay, this is actually how I want to live. This feels wholehearted, which I believe is one of Brene Brown's books as well. But this feels extremely wholehearted. This feels real. And I want to live life wide awake, wholehearted, in real relationships. So that is sort of the process of my vulnerability journey. And so that's been over the past 20 years. So yeah, now it's just like who I am. It's come second nature. And I sometimes have to remember, like, oh, you just do it with wise. You just do it with like people that are safe. Not everyone, Jen, or else I'd become an overshare too.
Oh, that is so, so good. I love that. And I think today, if we're asking, because I really want this to be reflective for listeners, that if you're listening on here right now, ask yourself, where do I lean when it comes to vulnerability? Am I at a place where I have a good relationship with myself and kind of the journey that I've been on? Because as I was listening to Brene yesterday, she just talked about if you cannot love yourself, if you cannot find compassion and empathy for yourself, you're not going to be able to do it with others. But what do we all deeply want? We want connection. And connection comes when you're seen and when you're known, not just the little pieces and parts that you're allowing people to see while you hide the rest, because gosh, that's exhausting, right? But some of us are nervous. Like we fear someone truly seeing us, truly knowing us, because what then if we're not worthy of that belonging or that acceptance or connection? And so I'm just going to ask you to search your heart today if you're listening to this, because I think there's some powerful like stuff that can happen. And just like you talked about, Jen, it's like when we become a little bit more aware ourselves. And I always come back to David, right? He was known as the man after God's own heart. But how did he posture himself? He just was like, search my heart, oh God. Like renew a steadfast spirit within me, like reveal where the sin is in me and cleanse me. And so I think when we're willing, because God doesn't ever force himself on us, but when we're willing to say, okay, God, search my heart, like where are the areas of hurt or pain that are causing me to have fear and hold things, close at hand. And instead, because Jen, don't we all want that kind of life to live wide awake, fully alive, wholehearted? And that's only going to happen if we're willing to take the risk of being vulnerable. And yes. I know that, Jen, you and I have worked through this whole worked is not, I shouldn't use the past tense because it's like a continual contending and working through, right? But where we have to like pep talk ourselves and remind ourselves like that it's not just about us, and we don't leaning into that perfectionistic tendencies, those image management that, hey, I've got a plan and I know the plan, God, like it's easy to fall back into that. So when you're thinking about how do you consistently move away from that and towards this living in vulnerability and living in truth and in living in the worthiness that God promises you, what does that look like in a practical way? Like some habits or mindsets, or like, what do you tell yourself, or what are, just give the listeners some things to go off of like, if they want to take this journey, where do they start?
Okay. So, practically speaking, I think that I would journal. I journal every single day for this very reason, because I think that, you don't want to just start shooting off all of you don't want to word vomit a bunch of things like just on social media or with just like, at a coffee shop with a table of folks. And so I process everything first to God. And then, and a little bit of this to myself. Like I'm talking to myself a little bit in my journals too. It's like, and so I get honest there about the like part of the image management, part of like I'm afraid to say what is true is we're ashamed. We're ashamed of what's happened in our home. We're ashamed that we actually haven't followed through with what we said. We're ashamed that we are still carrying the weight when we've tried something 10 times. We're ashamed that we said we were going to write a book 10 years ago and we have one. We're ashamed of ourselves. But the only way to beat that shame is to share. So share with Jesus first. Share with Jesus first. Be honest about it. Stop pretending because sometimes we'll just well, if I don't even think, don't even think about it. Just say I am horrified that this is what's happening in my home. This is not what I wanted it to be. This is not what I thought. I feel like a failure. Am I a failure, God? Do you think I'm a failure? Oh, okay. What do you say is true? Then you go to the script, all the things. It can be a bit of a rant. That's what vulnerability is. But I really think practically, a journal helps so that you can get it out from your heart and your head to God and yourself. And you will gain perspective, and it'll actually because whether you're an external processor or an internal processor, you're doing that. You're doing that through journaling. And what I said about the sharing part, I think that our greatest pain, all of the particulars of our pain are actually what lead to the particulars of our calling. So our pain becomes our purpose. You say this all the time. This is not new for your audience and not new to you. The thing in between though is the connection. None of those will happen if we do not create the connection in the middle, and the connection comes from being able to share safely. So I would then practically, after you do all of that whole journal process, then practically start with one. Find that you have that one safe person that's not going to say what you should do. They will not shit on you. They will just listen. They may not even totally relate. So they may not say me too. Don't let that scare you off, because their story might be completely different. That may not be their path. But you got to find someone that you can share with, because then it's putting a nail on the coffin of shame. And so that would be next, is sharing with someone, whether it is the dream that you feel you're failing at, or the difficult scenario and the circumstance that you're experiencing that you don't have a solution to, and you kind of don't want anyone to know, but you're going to obediently step into the light. It's about getting in the light so that the darkness doesn't win. The enemy loves our isolation. So then, that's only 2 steps. You might have more, but those are my 2 key things that I practice on the regular, and I would encourage you to start with.
Yep. So good. Nope. I couldn't agree more. That's where shame and fear come from. And that is the accuser, right? And if we stay in the dark, all of that stuff grows. And if we try to stuff it and shove it and numb it and hide it, it grows and it gets worse. And so being really specific about finding the right kind of person in your life, and then also knowing when you need to hire help, because you and I have both done that, right? And kind of, because when you aren't actually inviting the Lord and the Holy Spirit into your situation, what you can often do is you're venting. You're not being just honestly and helpfully vulnerable, right? And so finding that difference, right, of going, okay, I don't really want to, like you said, go and vomit on people, because that safe person isn't going to want to be your safe person for very long, right? I get it out. I let God see all of my ugly. And I really find that it's powerful when you can connect with other people through your vulnerability, your weakness, your humanness, but then you can also lead people through your strength, which is what you said, Jen. It's when I get to the place where I'm letting God heal those places in my life where I can still reference my imperfection, my humanness, how far I have to go, and not in a, false humility kind of way, but in a, thank God that what is impossible through me is possible through God. Actually, in a hopeful way, it helps other people go, wow, okay, if she feels that way too. Oh my gosh, if she fights with her husband too, if she yells at her kids too, and Then she gets into the presence of God. She turns the worship music on. She shifts her energy and she goes and apologizes and shows up different the rest of her day. Maybe I can do that too. And so it's connecting with people through that vulnerability of, yeah, that I fall into this place too, but this is what I do when I get there, right? And so I think you do that really well.
Are you feeling a stirring for more? Do you dream of a life filled with courage and confidence, but fear holds you back? Then you need to be at the 2024 Build Your Brave conference that I'm hosting in Scottsdale, Arizona, the weekend of September 26th through the 28th. This conference is going to be for women ages 12 to 112. Every generation will experience an unforgettable weekend that will nourish your soul, ignite your passion, and equip you with the tools that you need to bravely step into all that God has created you to do. Imagine a life where you go after your dreams with confidence and urgency, where you seize opportunities without hesitation. Build Your Brave will show you how to make that a reality. This is a limited seat event, so register today to grab your spot and get ready to build the brave and unstoppable you. Head to www.meganvalentine.co to get your ticket today.
The goal is not to just vent and get it off your chest. The goal is to move through it and forward, and that it doesn't get a hold on you. And so I would say all of these steps, the God, yourself, the other, the professional help, has to come from a posture of, I don't want to stay here. I want to be better. I do want your plan for my life. I do want the fulfillment of the dream. I do believe, I am confident in this, that you who began a good work in me will be faithful to complete it. I do believe that. And so I want to take the steps out of this, image management, self-reliance, shame, fear. And so that has to be the posture in every single part of the process. And I do think that you have being coachable and open, and sometimes you might have to hire them. They may not be your best friend. They may not be even someone awesome from your Bible study that can do that. You might have to hire that person. I have hired the people because I want to be better. I want to be better, and I want to. So I think that's super important. The posture by which we are being vulnerable actually matters. It's not just for the sake of saying it.
Yep, 100%. And, something that I want to move into is because this is maybe a current area where Jen and I are both contending and learning to surrender in, but it's this area of parenting, right? Which, I think requires a lot of surrender anyways. But, Jen and I have always talked about the and life, right? We are moms who were made for more, who are building businesses, and we're raising kids, and we want thriving families and a thriving marriage, and we believe that you can do both, but it's going to take some intentionality. And now we've reached this season, Jen, that has caused, I think, both of us to kind of need a new level of trust in the Lord, which is releasing some of these kids, graduating some of these kids, knowing they're going to be leaving our home, moving elsewhere, starting their lives, and it requires a lot of palm up, like you said, right? We got to stop white knuckling and going, hey, I had this plan. Wait a second, this plan didn't look like this. So Jen, let's talk about that, because you and I are at a vulnerable place right now where we could fall into some of that self-reliance or white knuckling some things, trying to keep people close and actually drive them away. So Let's talk about this new season that we're both in.
Oh gosh, it's next level for me. But I think it's been fascinating. For context, I have 4 kids, and they now are all, they're 14, 16, 18, and 20. And it's a different, some are moving out of the home and across the country. And I think that when you become a mom, you hear it goes fast. You hear all those things, and you do. I think most of the women listening want to be a good mom and want to embrace all the seasons and want to live in the and want to make their own impact in the world, but then also make that impact on their home. So, and I think that what I am learning is how much, yes, intention. I definitely parented with intention. It is requiring a new level of intention for me, because what was intention before was also mixed with a ton of control, because it was actually appropriate for the stage of life that we're in. However, some things are being highlighted to me even as I have to release my grip. I'm going to just read this quote that you and I were kind of chatting back and forth about. And it says, perhaps freedom doesn't come from escaping something that's controlling us. Perhaps it comes from releasing our grip on what we're trying to control and surrendering to something greater. When the kids were little and I would travel, I would call it freedom, because I had someone to stay back at home, and I often traveled out of the country. So it's like, I'm leaving the US and this is freedom, freedom of time, freedom of resources, like freedom of this and life. And as I have been what that quote brought up in me is, I remember being in lines in customs and calling home and needing to know, like, okay, I was the mom who had a full list of what everyone needed and where everyone was going and all the things. And I would call home and ensure, like, we're good because I'm heading out of the country. Now, did we have our phones on when we got to the next part? Yes. I was the mom that didn't check in. But not because I was that free, but because I was actually terrified. And I was actually like, I don't want to FaceTime. I don't want to. And I would at night sometimes be like, my husband would be like, should we check on the kids? I mean, I'd be like, you do it. You do it. I would not even check it. And it was because there was a part of me that actually wasn't surrendering their care, their well-being. Like, I controlled it to a point and then had to avoid and just escaped. And going into a season where I have a daughter that's moving across the country, and I don't want to be obsessed with Life 360, I'm like, oh God, I actually have always lived a little bit in control. And that can look really pretty in a Facebook post or an Instagram reel. And it's not that it's not true or it's not real, but I'm like, oh God, I can't live like just avoiding really the rest of my kids' lives because I'm moving out of a season where it's even okay to control. It just becomes weird and dominating and completely overbearing. And it will make a miserable life for them and a miserable life for me. And I want them. The real goal of all of us as moms from the get-go is to raise incredible humans that go and make their mark on the world and find fulfillment and joy and all the things. That's what we want for them. And it is what we want for ourselves too. And it cannot happen if I do not surrender and release my grip, which means I'm having to hold on tighter to the grip of God, because I'm actually scared about some things. I'm actually scared. And I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to be afraid. So that's where I'm at. How about you?
Well, I've been battling this for the last year and a half, and mine isn't moving across the country quite yet, but she's definitely at the place where, when she was 3, she was demanding to make her own decisions. So you can imagine at 19.
Yeah.
And so it's, there's this part of me that I was kind of that mom that, she forgot her homework or her lunch or something. Like, I had the ability to take it to school and help her figure it out. And so I did that. I probably rescued a bit too much. And then through high school, I think my hovering and a little bit of my needing to control pushed her away. And so I got to the place where I was like, okay, this isn't working. And I don't know about you, Jen, but when you start to realize there's interesting family dynamics and you're trying to figure out what each kid needs individually, and you can't force anybody else to do their own work.
Right.
Right? You can't go, hey, I'm demanding all of you go to therapy so we as a family can figure this out, right? I mean, you can try, but they got to want that. What I did learn is I can do my work
Yes.
and I can keep getting better, right? Like that's one of the biggest messages I have for every mom out there is the only control that God promised you is self-control, and you get to work on you, and as you get more resources and tools, you can parent better, you can communicate better, you can learn how to listen more and ask more questions instead of talking at people. Like those will change things and shift things in your family as you
Yes.
start the morning by getting up early and reading the word and being in the kitchen with your worship music on. Like you're setting the tone. And so there is a lot we can do in these seasons where I'm like, I feel completely out of control. Love Life 360, can totally tell that location's frozen. Where have you been? You know, I mean, it's a whole thing. And so now I'm like, and you know, I do want to read this because when Brene talked about this specifically, she was like, the reason we have to figure out vulnerability on our own is because if we don't, and Jen, we've talked about this, like whatever doesn't get transformed, it gets transferred.
Yep.
Like if we don't
Yep.
figure out some of this, then we pass it down to our children, some of our anxiety, some of our fear, some of our controlling, or it creates, you know, not the kind of relationship that we want with our kids. And what we want as parents, and especially as moms, and especially as moms like us, Jen, I think we want more guarantees, right? That whole thing of like, I'm going to do good, God, and you're going to do good back to me, right? And I'm going to be a good, faithful person and use the gifts you've given me and read your word, and I'm going to do the things. And then you're going to do the things, right? And when it looks different than that, we struggle. And I think we have to be careful because sometimes we set out to protect our kids and fix everything and try to make their world so perfect, and it's not preparing them for what's really happening. And, you know, she said, we're trying to perfect our children. That's not going to be helpful. What's going to be helpful is when we get to this place of being able to look at our children and say, you're imperfect, but you are wired for struggle and you are worthy of love and belonging.
Amen.
And no matter what, you will always have a place here, right? And so moms, let's look at the message that we're sending. Let's do the work that we need to do, because I want to be able to look at my kids and stop trying to fix everything for them.
Yes.
And go, hey, you were hardwired for struggle. You've got this. What would be a potential solution? Or giving them space to figure it out, because pretty soon they leave your house and they got to figure it out anyway. And so it's just work that, you know, we got to do.
Yeah, I have read more books and listened to more podcasts about this season of parenting than I think I did when my kids were younger. And maybe I thought, maybe the season where it's more appropriate to command. You know, when they're little, there's a lot of command happening. Now it's more coaching. And I'm like, I got to learn how to do this, because I think it's a myth that motherhood ever ends. I still call my mom. So, but motherhood sometimes does end if it's too dominating and too controlling and they want to get away from you. And I desperately I want relationship with the people that matter most to me. I birthed them because I wanted them. And so I still want relationship with them. And so yielding control over their lives. But I'm not just like, I don't feel like it's like just yield control. Like, okay, go do whatever. For me, it's not that passive. It's a more active, like I'm yielding control over your life because I'm giving that to God. And that I'm joining him. I'm going to go co-parent with Jesus and trust the work that he's doing in your life, which might represent struggle, which is going to represent making huge mistakes. Some of the biggest mistakes I made was when I was 20 years old. Like but it shaped me. It shaped me. And there was nothing that my mom could have done to stop it, because I was making my decisions. And so I think that this kind of surrender, it is terribly uncomfortable, which is why, to your point, we have to do the work. And it's actually counterintuitive, I think, especially as a mom. And, but it is the path. I think it's the path to gaining the meaningful influence, and more importantly, what our children need. So yeah, the influence that we desire in their life, that meaningful connection that we want, but it's also like appropriate and it's what they need. And so, yeah, I mean, there's been so many things that we have been doing over just the last the past 6 months with our daughter that's moving that have been like, oh yeah, no, you don't have a curfew, or, oh, okay, like, thanks for it. And then it's almost like, and I'm like, you'll like, okay, like, because I keep thinking, because I would rather her have that release of control now while I'm still, really right in her home. She's still right here, because in 3 months from now, I can't get there. I can't bring the lunch. I can't do it. So I'm doing it for me so that I can truly live freely and be, and I want to do it for her. I want to do it for her so that she can become all that God wants her to be. And I'm just finding it to be hard good. It's really hard work, but I believe with all my heart it's going to produce goodness in the long run. Who knows what the next few years are going to look like, but I do believe. And I think that to your point about vulnerability, I've been honest with her. I've been like, because I blew it. I really blew it on a decision. And I told her, I'm like, I was actually afraid. I was terrified that something was going to happen to me. That's why I was freaking out about it. And so I'm really sorry, because I was afraid, and I don't want to parent out of fear. And I do trust you. And at the end of the day, I made really horrible mistakes. I told her some of the horrible mistakes that I've made. And then I said, so I don't want that for you, but at the same time, you have to walk your path. And it actually was a deeply connected moment. I mean, she cried. I'm like, oh no, are my mistakes too much for you to hold? Did I say? She goes, no, I'm so glad you told me. It helps me a lot. And okay, here I go. Here I go.
And gosh, that's such a great example as we get ready to close of this whole concept of how connection comes through vulnerability. And as moms, sometimes maybe you didn't have a mom that connected with you through vulnerability, and so maybe you haven't figured out how to do that. But at some point as your kids age, your relationship with them does have to shift a little bit, and it doesn't always feel totally natural. It's going to take some intention to go, okay, because I was always like that mom. I'm like, I'm not your friend. Like, you've got lots of friends. I'm your mom. Okay. Because I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to speak truth to you. I am going to tell you no. Like, I'm going to be the one in your life. But now I'm like, okay, I also want to be your friend. I want you to trust me, and I want us to be able to talk about anything. And that has to start sometimes with my vulnerability and me revealing my humanness, instead of talking at her or telling her what to do, kind of saying, hey, let's chat about this. And what do you think about this? And here's my experience with this. And this is where my reaction and opinion are coming from. This is the place, and so opening that door. And again, I would just say to all of you women, let's be willing to do some of that work on us so that we have the ability to do that. And in Brene Brown's studies, what she found is when she looked at these groups of people, the groups that one group can be vulnerable, feels like they have deep connection, feels like, there's a strength there, and the other group that doesn't, and there's a lot of fear, more shame, harder time connecting, harder time in relationships, whether it be friendships, marriages, parenting, all the things. It was interesting because worthiness was such a big factor. Yep. Because if it has to start with us. Okay. So mama, if you're listening, you first have to believe that you are worthy of connection. You are worthy of belonging. I'll tell you what we want to tell our kids. You are imperfect and hardwired for struggle. And no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter where you're at right now, you are worthy of connection and belonging. And there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God. There's nothing that can do it. But if you get to that place where you can accept that, it is going to be so much easier for that to flow out of you and become part of you as you parent and as you have relationships. But it's got to start with you. So Jen, I know I'd love to hear just some closing words, and also I know we can get your book on Amazon, and we can, follow you on Instagram, but tell us the best way to connect with you. I know you're doing an incredible retreat in January. So kind of tell the ladies any last words and how we can kind of stay up to date with you.
Yeah, I think I have 2 words that I have even been saying to myself about all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's through, you just have these longings, desires, a vision. You have a vision for your life and it feels maybe disrupted or derailed. Keep going. You really do want meaningful connections, and you really do want to have a rich relationship with God, with yourself, and with others. You want to own your worth. You want to be in good friendships. You don't want to live this life alone. Keep going. And then as it relates to your home, man, I don't think we're not going to have it figured out this side of heaven. It's going to be, we're human. And it's going to have big ups and big downs. And you're going to blow it. And so are they. Keep going. Keep going. I just feel so passionate right now, even in my own life, this like faithful endurance. It's a faithful endurance that I am walking out. Keep going. Keep going. And God is with us and he is leading us. And yes, I do have a retreat where these are the topics. It is all about deepening that faith and nurturing your home and really nourishing your whole health. And it happens through the beauty of God's creation and meaningful connections and, some soul care and some self-care. So yes, that's happening, and that is open now. Honestly, most of the stuff that I do, you can find at jenjonesdirect.com. So if you head over to my website, everything is linked there, even where to follow me on Instagram. All of it is just, that's kind of a one-stop shop. I don't know if people use websites very much anymore, but that is kind of a one-stop shop for me. Or my link tree, I guess, on Instagram, whatever. But that's all that. Thank you for having me on. This was a really, really fun. It's like, isn't that funny? Like the hard stuff when you're like connecting and it's resonating and you're like, oh, you're learning and you're growing together. It's like, oh, that's fun.
Well, it is, though. It's good for your heart and good for your soul just to get with some people that you can go below the surface level and talk about your journey and hopefully help any of the ladies that are listening to go, okay, I hope you feel relieved hearing where Jen and I have been, where we are, that we're still contending and all of that. Yeah. Now, Jen, you are original member of Team Brave when it started with 7 ladies. Okay. So I want you to do one last plug for the Build Your Brave conference that's coming in September, because you've known my vision and my heart and my life for the last decade. So tell ladies why they need to be there and, what it's kind of for.
Yeah, I actually think the fact that this has been brewing in you for a decade is beautiful and actually should cause people to want to come, because this is not some sort of flash in the pan thing. This isn't like just like a wild hair idea. This has been building in you for a very long time. And it's not like it's even like, oh, and now. No, this is just this is the fruit of labor that has been in your daily commitment to be consistent. This is the Brave that you've been building for over a decade, but very intentionally in the last decade with a group of people that started as 7 and is now like, I think over 10,000 in an online space. But we now have an opportunity to come together in real life, which I'm grateful for the online space. We're doing this. It's beautiful. Yep. But there is absolutely nothing like being in a room, one, in the presence of God, like gathered together. There's like faith rises when that happens, and you can encounter the presence of God in a way that is unique when it's with others. And then getting to tangibly be with you, Megan, for all of these people that only know you virtually and that have heard your words and have read your books and have listened to your podcast, to be able to just be face to face. It's powerful. That's how God created us. He created us to actually bear the burden of another. You have to, like, you kind of got to get it next to each other to do that, to be with one another. And so I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer that people would come. And I just think that what is about to happen is the culmination. They're going to get to experience a new, like, it's the beginning of something new, but it's actually also like the culmination of something that has a brave that has been building for a decade. So it is going to be powerful.
Thank you, friend. You have always been such an amazing encouragement to me to keep stepping out and keep fighting. And like you said, keep going no matter what is happening in me, around me, all the things. And I am feeling such a fire to activate just the next round of women who they have a dream, they have a heart, they have a calling, they have a vision, but they haven't gotten activated to step out and do it. And it's time to activate them, to get brave, to get bold, to shine bright, to figure out their next few steps. So I'm super excited. And you and I are passionate about that.
Yeah.
We want every generation of women to be able to come together and to operate in their purpose for the kingdom. And, you and I have contended through some things, and we've learned some mindsets and skill sets that have really helped us to be able to step into that power that God has for us and to operate in that. And so I know you and I are both going to be speaking and sharing, and there's quite the lineup of people. So gosh, come hang out with me and Jen in the last weekend in September.
Okay, I just have to say this, and you can add this in the podcast or not. You just said something like the people who are next, like who are the next 7? Because the 7 of us, every single one of that original 7 is doing mighty works in this world. Everyone's making an impact and a splash in their own path, and there is something powerful about that small 7, and now we're all going and doing our work and multiplying. And yes, we're still very connected in Team Brave, but like we're going and doing our thing. So you need to come to this event to be a part of the next 7. I mean, there's going to be there might be 7,000 there, but the point is you're in there. So, but I'm like, yes, you need to come, because there is it's legacy. It's like who's next? Who's rising up next to go build your brave? You got to come to build your brave. It's good.
Yep. So good. Oh, Jen, I love you. Thank you for being here today. I look forward to ladies following you, connecting with you, learning more about your story and your journey. And for those of you who feel called, grab her book if that resonated with you. Check out her retreat. Just follow her and be part of her tribe, because she is amazing and she's been such a great friend to me. So Jen, thanks again for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.